The biggest problem is that they disappear. They don't ever do it. If you have these goals and you go talk to a mentor, do what they say. Do it. You have to go do whatever these recommendations are.
Welcome into the Get Invested podcast, a podcast about all things real estate and real estate investing, brought to you by Capital Velocity Investments and a part of the Matthias Talks Investing Substack.
Hello, welcome into another episode of the Get Invested podcast. As always, I'm here with my co-host Matthias, and we are excited to talk all things real estate investing, and perhaps a little, actually a lot life today, maybe actually. That's a little foreshadowing for the topic today. But speaking of life, what's been going on in yours, Matthias?
Well, I've had lots of friends reaching out, offering their condolences on the passing of the Beach Boys icon Brian Wilson, which is so happens to be the name of my father. No relation, obviously, to the star, but a lot of friends jokingly reaching out, saying they're sorry for my loss and whatnot. It was a running joke back in the childhood days that my dad's name is Brian Wilson, and although I do enjoy the Beach Boys, so it is sad. But he was of age, right? Like, so it wasn't tragic.
Yeah.
Of passing, it was he had a good run.
Yeah, I think everyone could be like, you acknowledge it, but if you live into your 80s and have a life of that kind of like success and fulfillment, I think we just
Plus, he went through
a life lived.
Yeah, he went through some stints of. I think there were some serious drug issues, some serious.
There were.
So he making it to 82 is probably a pretty big accomplishment for him. So, or 80.
Well, and that was
something like that.
always. That was always the kind of fascinating thing about him, was that like made such. He's famous for making such bright, cheery, music, but he was had a lot of darkness apparently that he dealt with. So now, does your dad like the Beach Boys?
Yeah, he does. And he used to make the joke, like back when you wrote checks at the checkout counter, like at a grocery store or something, they were like, "Oh, show your ID," and he'd show his ID and he'd be like, "Oh yeah, I've recovered from the drug problems," and I'd be like standing behind him going, "Great joke, Dad, great joke."
Depending on the age of the person ringing it up, they're going to be like,
yeah, this was way back in the day, but so when I was a kid and hanging out with him, but yeah, I know. It was a dad joke. That was
absolutely.
I learned from the
absolutely. Best. Now, did he make that joke when he was like actually in uniform? Because that would have been there. Was like,
no,
I guess that's a good thing.
Probably didn't do that. I can imagine.
Yeah, exactly.
Or at least not to the general public. Maybe to his bros when they were in the team room or something.
They've actually the Beach Boys have kind of made somewhat of a resurgence with the youth, for lack of a better term. Like, I have a friend whose son does kind of just for fun, acapella stuff, and they did like a whole Beach Boys performance. Yeah, they did like a whole entire thing for Beach Boys, like on their own volition. Like, it wasn't like old people asked them to come sing and they're like, "Play the Beach Boys." It was literally they wanted to do it. So
sure,
apparently
I can see
it lives
doing
on.
Like a Beach Boys themed musical. I can see all kinds of stuff. There may be one, I don't know, but. Yeah, that stuff's catchy, man. It's catchy, and it's also like it's like youthful freedom, going to the beach, having a enjoying the there's good, wholesome fun, but also just catchy. Like, there's a reason they were all hits.
There's now a Stranger Things on Broadway, so if there isn't yet to be a Beach Boys musical, I would imagine that something is in the works at some point. Yeah, they're taking everything to the stage. I don't really understand why you would want to do Stranger Things, which relies on scary technology,
heavily
produced images.
Yeah, I was gonna say CGI and stuff.
Other than acknowledging and celebrating the life of your non-dad Brian Wilson. Anything else of note on your side?
Not really. I did get asked what I wanted to do for Father's Day yesterday by Jen, and it's such a funny thing because and I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm probably going to take heat for this, but
I know where this is going.
I didn't answer. I just said, I don't know what I want to do. I said the U.S. Open is on, so I'll probably want to watch some golf. So I just said that. But like, the reality is, and it's different for moms and dads, right? Like, moms just want to spend all day with their kids, and their kids like don't go and do things with your friends. You got to stay home and do things with mom. On the other hand, dads are like, can I go play golf? And not in the can we all go play golf, but like, can I go play golf with my friends? So it's like, it's such interesting because guys dads typically would love a break, not the entire day or whatever, but a break to go blow off some steam, do something a little bit different. I don't really think I want to do that this Sunday. I'd probably just rather chill at the house, get in the pool a little bit, and then watch the finale of the major tournament. But it is always funny because whenever that question gets asked me, it's like, I'm not allowed to answer this question honestly. That's one of the ones. It's like, if your wife ever asks, like, does this make me look fat? Like, of course you never answer that question. And then this one is like, what do you want to do for Father's Day? It's like, well, I'm not allowed to say what I really want to do. It's just not. That's part of it.
I think it's probably one like stage dependent, right? I mean, I definitely know of some moms who have like asked for like a break, but that's when like the kids are like really young and they're like really demanding. I think it flips when they're teenagers and they don't hang out that much anymore. Then it's like, you've got to hang out with me.
Yeah, mom's using it. Mom's pulling the card and
yeah. And now, do you ask Jen what she wants to do for Mother's Day? Or are you supposed to come up with that on your own? Oh, no. You guys are one of those where it's kind of just like open communication. You don't need to build in surprises or anything.
No, I mean, it's definitely, I do ask her because it's like, hey, if there's something we got to book, something we got to put on the calendar or something like that, we'll do that. But then, and I'll ask her what she wants to eat, that we can cook or for breakfast or something, depending on where we are, whatever's going on. But, we make the cards with the kids and that kind of thing. But Jen and I are pretty easy. We don't really demand a whole lot of our days per se.
I mean, I got to think that Jen would probably dig. Now, Jen, I guess I'm speaking for you, but I'm not really. I'm just throwing this out there. That there's a part of Jen that would like a little bit, maybe a little pampering on Mother's Day and then away from people.
Yeah,
I think maybe some mothers worry about being judged for wanting to ditch the kids. Like, how do I want to celebrate being a mother? Not being a mother.
Yeah, no, I mean, she gets to do whatever she wants, so she knows that. But oftentimes, she just wants to hang out and maybe do one activity or something with the boys, and whatever she wants to do, we'll do. But she doesn't need a whole lot of stuff or doesn't ask for a whole lot of stuff. Plus, again, we have little kids, so it's not like I could just say, hey, we're going to go do, dinner theater or something. It's
right.
It's going to take coordination.
I'm actually meeting my dad in Lincolnton. It's like halfway between Charlotte and Asheville, essentially, to play some golf. It's kind of a twofer, Actually, as you guys are listening to this, I should be on the links. It's kind of a twofer since his birthday is the 24th, which we are celebrating by most likely hosting our first investor Q&A in honor of my father's birthday. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. So we meet up and play golf, which, kind of the same thing. I would always go out, make sure I get a card and a present and everything for my mom and my dad. I'm like, do you want to just, let's just go play some golf. But
yeah, I'll be fine with that in a few years when my kids are old enough.
Right. Is Ethan old enough to like make his own card and stuff, or are you expecting something from him for Father's Day?
They'll probably do something at school or something, or at the daycare, but I don't expect anything. It's cool. He does a lot of stuff. I mean, he draws and, he'll do, I'll just turn him loose on an idea, for a card for mom, like for Mother's Day. I just, draw this, draw that. And then, we helped his brother sign his name to it, but Ethan kind of took care of the rest. It was pretty great.
Okay. So does he likes to draw? Does he done in his free time? Oh,
yeah.
Okay, cool.
He likes to draw. He also likes to write. We came home the other day with he had copied something. It was crazy. It was right before the end of school, but they were reading up on it was like geography or weather or something. I don't even remember. It was a science related class, and he copied a whole passage down on a piece of paper because he thought it was so interesting and he wanted to show it to us. And I was blown away. I was like, this kid's in first grade. It was like a comet that airburst over Russia back in the 1920s or something like that, or even earlier than that. It might have been, I don't know, I don't remember, but basically it blew all the trees down. It was a very famous thing that happened back in like kind of early recorded history, but like a comet airbursted and it was powerful enough that it wiped out an entire forest and just laid them all down. And they have evidence of this nowadays, whatever. He thought it was so cool. He wrote down like, a paragraph on a piece of paper and brought it home. It was wild.
I mean, for a first grader, that's a lot of handwriting.
It was like, I'd never seen him write that much before.
Because I mean, that's, is he writing on the thing with the lines where you match the lines?
It was just on a blank sheet of paper.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I don't want to get all cosmological, but it is it's crazy. The scope of size that is, the Milky Way or the universe is proven by the fact that we don't see more things like that happen, because stuff is flying around in space all the time, but like it never,
Yeah.
it
Well,
never seemed to be big
you also got
enough.
to remember that
down here.
we're in we're a speck of time over the grand scheme of how long the universe has been.
Yeah.
So we got these giant impacts of craters all around the world where it's happened. It's just weird.
That's how we got the moon.
Are potentially 82 years if you're Brian Wilson, and it doesn't happen in that time frame. That's not really that big of a time
Sure,
frame.
exactly.
So,
That's kind of, I guess you're pointing out
an instant
the span of geological time versus also the span of the space
of the universe. Yeah.
Well, speaking of being 82, Rachel recently told me that I had to be alive until she was at least 80. No excuses if I die before then. So I got to make it to at least 77. So
okay.
I guess I need to get on this. Yeah, it's pretty close to the average.
It's right about ours. Yeah.
I guess I need to start taking all these supplements like that one person who's dedicated his whole life to like living forever or whatever. His name is Brian too, I think.
Gets hit by a car. What a waste. You know what I mean? I just feel like he can't take any risks at all in his life because he's focused so much on this one thing. It's like, oh, bro.
Yeah, you wonder how he travels, right? Like, I mean, because he doesn't like stay in his like
theoretically, yeah, I don't
bubble. Know. Yeah. That's that would be. Now, speaking of something that would be great on stage, that would be dramatic irony right there. If there was a play about him and then that's what happened.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well. We probably should switch to our main topic today, and it is apropos of this weekend's holiday. This weekend is Father's Day, and today we're talking about mentorship, which I don't guess you would ever call yourself a mentor as a father, but a father is also a mentor. I feel like saying I'm a mentor to my son is a little bit like saying I'm babysitting my kids. It's kind of implied, but
yeah, fair.
But it is in there. So that's what I want to talk about. People who have impacted us, how we think about mentorship as both, and this is a two-sided coin, right? And we want to talk about being mentored as well as mentoring and the approach to both. So I'm turning it over to you. Take it away.
Yeah, I think I wrote a post about like what kind of prompted this podcast topic is. I wrote a post about it the other day, and I was like, man, I could talk about this for a hot minute. Basically, just the idea that we all have mentors. Some of them we realize they're mentoring us, and some of them we don't. Like a dad kind of molding our behavior and our attitude and our outlook. And then also just in life, I feel like my post kind of focused on the ego part of, hey, I don't need a mentor. I can do it on my own. Which may or may not be true, but also it's like, man, we're really shooting ourselves in the foot when we have that kind of attitude, because it's like, why? What does it prove that you did it on your own? I mean, just it's only an ego stroke. It has nothing to do with actual success. Because if you can get success easier in a better way because somebody else showed you how to do it, I don't taking your pride out of that is the fastest way to get to that success. So I kind of wanted to talk about like some mentors that I've had, both like on a personal level and then just generally in life and finances and investing, things like that. And then like you said, we'll talk a little bit about philosophy and how like, you don't even have to have an actual active mentor to participate in mentorship, basically. But I figured I'd start off with kind of I figured I'd touch on like an investing mentor, a life financial mentor, and also a military mentor that I had. But I'll start off with the like, I've always been a Warren Buffett fan. So he clearly, I've never had, a dinner with Warren Buffett, which is a thing that would be super awesome that he does every year. But basically,
I actually have a friend from college who got invited to one of those where,
that would be so cool.
Where he like sits down. Yeah. He came over they actually got him to come over and talk to him, and they made a pitch. Like they let him.
Oh, you told me about that. You told me about that.
Yeah. So
just in studying, reading quotes and reading philosophy, even whenever he does his annual Berkshire Hathaway, he kind of has a speech and kind of gives a talk every time, and he'll pontificate about a few things while giving updates on the business. I've talked about it ad nauseum on this podcast and in posts and everything, that I think I just heard another great quote the other day that if you can build the discipline to kind of follow direction from a good mentor, like there's really no barrier to success. You'll eventually get there. It's a speed. And so somebody, the quote I just heard, I was on a podcast the other day. Somebody asked him, "Hey, how come you're okay with giving away all your secrets?" And his answer was, "Because nobody ever wants to get rich slow," which is his philosophy. It's like, he's like, "I'm not worried about it because nobody ever does it. Everybody wants to go get rich quick, and they don't. Nobody." It's his philosophy, and it's been proven right. But it takes discipline to adhere to a get rich slow strategy, and I thought it was perfect.
Wants to get rich slow. Well, I've been I wouldn't consider Warren Buffett a mentor of mine or anything. No shade, WB. Just hasn't been my journey. But I have been reading The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham, who apparently was a big influence, a significantly large influence on Warren Buffett, to the point that he wrote the preface of this book. And honestly, it's been very interesting because there's clearly a lot of things that have come out in quotes from Warren Buffett that started here, including the one about, don't buy anything that you wouldn't be happy to hold on to for 10 years. The line in here is, don't buy anything that you wouldn't, like, if you couldn't see what the stock price was for like the next long time, you'd be fine with it. Like, exactly. Don't buy anything that if you bought it and then for whatever reason, like for a year, you couldn't see what the stock price was. Yeah. You would still be fine. So I was like, oh, that's an interesting, like, kind of, that's Warren clearly took that. Sorry, I guess we're on a first name basis now. Warren Buffett clearly took that and kind of made it a little bit more specific to the time frame. Yeah. I think the craziest thing about this last thing on this is that apparently, now this was a long time ago, but the first time he wrote this book in like the 50s or whatever, one of the things he was arguing against was the conventional wisdom that you should buy a stock because it's been improving, and then when it starts going down, sell it. Like literally the opposite of what we think of today. That you should buy a stock that has improved. That's not his philosophy. He's fighting against, like, he was fighting against a conventional wisdom of the time. It was you should, if a company's stock has been improving and it goes way up, then you should buy it and then keep it, I guess, for dividends or whatever until
when it starts going down, then you sell it.
Well, then sell it. It's like, yeah, it's
interesting.
It's pretty crazy.
No wonder they had crashes back then.
Well, that's how you get there. Yeah, it was. I was like, huh? Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting because he's using it as an illustration among many other things, and I think Warren Buffett would do the same thing, and he kind of did with the "no one wants to get rich slow" comment. That, like, people say a lot of things out there that mean they're right. Like, people have opinions.
True. Yep, everybody's got one. Yeah, but I figured so Warren Buffett, probably my number one investing mentor, even though obviously he doesn't know who I am. But we'll talk a little bit more about like passive mentoring later on. But I want to give a quick shout out to Colonel Chivas, who is retiring in, I think, a month or two from the Air Force, a colonel. But he was the last commander that I had. And actually, I don't know if he wasn't my last commander, but the most impactful commander I had when I was in the Air Force. My last duty station, my last job, he was my boss there. But kind of up to him, most of the commanders I had were, they were fine. But they were less concerned with the people on a personal level than he was. And he kind of showed that he took the time to do mentoring. He was a J3, which was an operations guy in charge of all the flying that we were doing in Afghanistan, when I was the J5 in charge of all the planning we were doing. And we would sit and have philosophical conversations while the planes were flying and the crews were out doing the work. We'd just sit in the jock watching the screens, making sure, doing some battle monitoring and talk and philosophize. And I'd never done that with it. Granted, I was a higher rank than I'd ever been before too, but he did that regularly with any and all ranks of people. He would sit down, have good conversations, play basketball. We'd go bloody each other up in the gym playing basketball after a long night, all kinds of good stuff. But he kind of showed, he was the first commander, and he and I didn't agree on a whole lot of stuff. I mean, we agreed on certain things, but there was other things we didn't agree on. But the thing that he showed me and he proved more than any other commander I ever had was the kind of taking the personal interest in developing the people according to what they wanted. There'd always be commanders say, "Hey, don't get out." Not necessarily to me, but to a bunch of people thinking about getting out. He would just ask people, "Hey, what do you want to accomplish in your life?" And if it wasn't Air Force related, he would still support that and figure out a way to get them. Hey, if you do this next thing for the Air Force, maybe it'll help you accomplish that in your life. And he just took that interest and and that extra effort to care about his people and try to connect them with what they actually wanted. And I never saw that kind of effort out of anybody else. And he had a whole bunch of connections, so he would pick up the phone and call if somebody wanted some crazy job that nobody had ever heard of in the Air Force. He knew somebody he could call to ask if he could try to push his guy that way, and it was impressive. You didn't see that in the Air Force. I wish there was more of it.
And so it sounds like, I mean, a lot of people see their position, like in his position, they might see the mentoring as developing this person at their job rather than
as a person,
as a
life.
person. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, so that was cool. Shout out to Colonel Chivas.
That could be a tough line to walk. Some people just don't feel comfortable, because you have to be a little bit more open to do that, right? So, some people just don't feel comfortable trying to walk that line of like being superior, I guess, in this instance, superior officer, but just a superior in general, and being human enough to connect on that level.
Sure. I mean, it depends. It comes at levels of command. Like, you can't have a general that's talking to privates like they're bros. It's just he doesn't have it, because there's literally thousands of them, and there's not enough time in the day. But maybe a smaller unit makes it a little more attainable for the unit we were in. But yeah, like taking the effort to build people, not just war machines.
Yeah, which I guess in some ways that's almost like might be one of the toughest places and positions to try to do that. Like developing someone to be a war machine, as you said, is like kind of the furthest from developing them as a human. If you really think of, what I'm saying, if you're thinking about it,
well,
as far as like
yes and no,
all other careers being equal. I mean, there's not really another one that's going to be more diametrically opposed, if you wanted to put it that way. Sure. I mean, for example, all of my mentors all through grad school, my professors, we're sitting there talking about literature, which is literally about people and ideas and humanity. So, having those kind of conversations and talking on that level was a more natural segue. It doesn't mean that all my professors were interested in developing the human either, right? My beloved mentor, Dr. John Lowe, he passed in October of 23.
Yeah, a couple of years ago. I remember that.
Yeah, I went to LSU to study with him, and then he went to Georgia, and he took me with him, and then he was at my wedding. Well, my first wedding. So
was I. I was at both. So
yeah, you were both. Yeah, I'm sure you met Dr. Lowe then, but so it's just a little bit more. It was much more natural for you to have those kind of human to human conversations and get into arguments about things not. Well, there was no such thing as not necessarily about the job, and in a lot of ways, right? Like it was all an attempt. But believe me, there can be a lot of literature professors who are very dry and very much not interested in you at all as a person.
I believe that.
Oh yeah. So Dr. Lowe was extraordinary, and his legacy proves that, because he definitely went out of his way to do that same thing. And I think he was one of the more. He was of an era where, it was very much changing when I was coming through about what you could do as in the English professor realm, which was shrinking drastically. But, he didn't really care what your goal was. We liked the same thing. He would help
whatever
it was. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Be clear on whether or not, like, is that this is not what you want to do. Great. How can I support you? Same kind of things. Just having those really long talks in the office that didn't have to necessarily have to do with any of our work. Same kind of thing.
Sure.
So he's getting out. How many years will that be for him?
20, pretty close to 20. He just pinned on full bird last year, I think. Pretty close to 20. Okay. Maybe a little more than 20. So definitely 20, but obviously, to retire, but maybe 22.
Okay. So, I mean,
yeah.
I was going to assume that since he had been your commanding officer and stayed in, that he was like at 25 or more.
He
may
be, but he was relatively young. He was very successful and rose rapidly. Every now and then, yeah. We were chatting the other day. He just had surgery on something, so it was just kind of a, hey, glad it went well. Get well soon, that kind of thing.
Right.
But I figured then last, I've talked about it before. The mentor, Jen's mentor in real estate, is the one who recommended that we get into real estate investing. Howard Levins, Howard and Michelle Levins, his wife still manages some of our properties. I knew nothing about real estate investing. I knew I wanted to be an investor. I knew that, but shout out to Howard for talking me into buying my first real estate investment property and starting a firestorm.
Yeah, I think that, well, for those of you who have been reading or listening for a little bit of time, pretty famously, Matthias was resistant to the first investment and had to be convinced.
That's
obviously,
true.
Things have changed.
Yeah, the roles have reversed on the Jen and Matthias side, where she was active in talking me into buying that first house, and now I'm actively convincing her to let me buy a whole bunch more stuff all the time.
Yeah. Now, do you guys still talk to them on a regular basis? Yeah. Are they weighing in on any of these on any of Capital Velocity Investments strategies and or aspirations?
Yeah,
or just more general stuff.
Michelle manages 4th Avenue. Michelle manages 4th Avenue and the 8 unit that we own. Jen and I own personally. So yeah, she's still. I mean, she's our local manager. If we buy anything in this area, she would be the manager, unless it was like a giant. Those are small complexes, so we have to use a small firm like hers. But potentially we would bring in a big national firm or something if we bought a couple hundred units or whatever. But absolutely.
What was? Did you guys have any conversation before you made the jump to Heritage Cove? Because I mean, that was the first big jump from the local smaller unit stuff.
I wouldn't say we talked specifically about it because we just knew that, obviously we wouldn't be able to use our known quantity. But I would say that we brought what we learned from working with them and what they taught us about what to expect in a property manager and, all the lessons that we learned over the years with other property managers before we switched over to Michelle. I'd say we kind of took those lessons with us, and I still take those lessons whenever, I learn every time we talk to a new property management team. I learn more about it, but about things I want to ask and where I want to poke and find out more. But yeah, I'd say, I mean, maybe not even actively telling us things we should do, but just showing us things that we need to look for.
So it sounds like, but no, I was just thinking about how, we talked about the Deer Run property manager and how that didn't go. So, but is that too far out for them to?
No, they took over. They took over that one.
Okay.
From us. Okay. It was tougher for them because it was a hoof over there. Somebody that works for Michelle was our lead manager on Deer Run until we sold it. Actually, I think she's still managing it for the new owner.
Okay. Any pithy sayings or thoughts that Howard and Michelle dropped on you that you want to share here that we might put in the show notes?
Howard is someone who does drop pithy notes, but I can't think of any off the top of my head. That's a Jen question. I should have asked her one. I didn't think about it, but I guarantee you Jen has some funny quips that he would have said that he.
Now I meant to ask earlier. Did you? I mean, for me, I went to LSU because of Dr. Lowe and the fact that he studied literature that I was interested in as well. So I went to be mentored, he was my dissertation advisor, et cetera, et cetera. So that was pretty straightforward. And the person that was my honors thesis advisor at Carolina, told me about him. So it was a very clear line, but it sounds like to me, Colonel Chivas kind of was a surprise. So when did you realize that was what was happening? And did you change your approach once you did, if you did?
I just realized pretty quickly once I got to his squadron, or once he took over the squadron. So I left the operational flying squadron, the gunship squadron, and I went to go to that, the wing plans job that I did in his squadron.
Is this the one where you were planning all the kind of exercises overseas and exercises with different parties and stuff? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So, which is a job I had been gunning for a long time. So, shout out to the last gunship commander I had who actually pushed me over that job. But Colonel Chivas was the vice, the second in command of that squadron when I got there. Then, relatively quickly after that, he took over. So,
and for the non-military people, a squadron is
it's a level. How the Air Force is organized, a squadron, it could be like 60 people, it could be 300 people. Basically, it's an organization. So a squadron of planes is also a squadron of people that fly those airplanes. And the gunship squadron was the biggest squadron in the Air Force because we had crew members, and then we had, I don't know, a dozen airplanes. And so we were about 300 people, one of the biggest flying squadrons in the Air Force. But then a fighter squadron might have 40 pilots. On a fighter plane, there might be one or two dudes per airplane. Yeah. That flying squadron might be 70 people, but with 30 planes or whatever. So it's just like an organization level. It's headed up by a lieutenant colonel usually, And then above that, there's like 5 or 6 squadrons to a wing.
So it's based on the plane, basically, is what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
The one I went to, it's a very weird squadron because it was smaller, but it was very diverse. Like we had a bunch of crazy different jobs that weren't even remotely related to each other. So there's a very widespread. There's probably 150, 120 people in that squadron.
Okay. I ask all this just to get a sense of the scope of kind of what you guys might have been talking about, things that you learned from him. The context might help. So, because that's what I'm really interested to know is, you said you learned a lot from him and you guys talked a lot about a lot of different things. So I'm just wondering, what were some of those realizations, especially did you realize what was happening immediately or did it take some time?
It was evident pretty quick because he would just come up to, we worked in a vault, and frankly, I think he had a lot more fun in our vault than dealing with, his immediate bosses over at his office. So he would come hang out with us and we'd have, conversations about who knows what. Could be philosophical, could be Air Force related, could be whatever. But just the way he interacted with, us captain major types all the way down to, the airmen that were working there and taking a personal interest and about them and the fact that he would read, he would actually read emails that we sent him, and you're always supposed to, do all these reports all the time. And he would actually read and understand what we were telling him about the people. And so he would like connect the face with some action that we were reporting on and things like that. So he just took a more personal interest than I had seen in the past. And that was pretty obvious pretty quick. But then, until we deployed, I didn't really get to spend that much time with him because he's that job is a very, very busy job, the commander that he's in. So we just had hours, overnight in Afghanistan, chilling, watching airplane screens where we got to have the nice long conversations, just kind of me and him, which was a bit later.
So I guess what I'm just interested to know kind of like what kinds of things he shaped for is like your plan to separate. Like, you guys have those conversations? And
we did. I told him what, by that point I knew that was my last deployment, actually, that staff one where I was the J5, he was the J3. So I told him what I wanted. I said I'm good. I've done my 9 deployments and I don't want to deploy again. I'm having children now. I don't need to. He knew about my real estate side gig, as it were. We talk about that occasionally too. And you know what? He actually invested in one of my later deals, and he even said, like, I don't really understand investing, but I'm only doing this because I saw your work when you were working for me, and I trust you. So go make me some money. And he just that was basically it. And I was like, that's one of the coolest things anybody's ever said to me. But
Colonel Chivas, if you want to come back around, we got more things working.
Yeah, which was pretty cool. But
okay,
yeah, let's change gears a little bit, and I want to talk about I mentioned, or alluded to it earlier, but basically how you can be a mentee to, passively, basically to a passive mentor. So kind of like I did with Buffett, where I just kind of followed and copycatted. And I wanted to get to kind of that ego thing I was talking about at the very beginning. It's like, I think the best way to accomplish something that you want, that, a goal you have, is to find somebody that's done it and then model your behavior, your strategies, whatever it is, after what they do, whether it's financial, whether it's investing, or anything else in life. Like I said, I think so many of us do ourselves a disservice by wanting to have the pride of saying, I did it all myself. Nobody showed me nothing. I taught myself all this. It's like, well, okay, then I can guarantee you it took way longer than it needed to. And it's like, what is the goal? Is the goal being a completely self-taught person? No. The goal is to get to XYZ accomplishment. Okay, well then let's find somebody who's done XYZ accomplishment or something along the lines of XYZ accomplishment and kind of talk to them if possible. If not, follow their footsteps and just do what they say. I think too many people, myself included, I taught myself a lot of stuff that I really didn't need to do. I didn't know too many people, were doing a lot of the things when I first started off in the real estate investing game. But basically, I figured out relatively quickly that if I wanted to get into, for instance, syndicating, I needed to find a podcast or a letter or a blog or something from somebody who had done it and figure out why and how they did it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that was just
well, I think, yeah, I think part of what you're talking about is just kind of central to a narrative that's very American, right? Mm-hmm. The idea of up by your bootstraps kind of thing, which, if you start thinking about it, everyone has always had help at some point or another. But I guess that's part of it, that fiercely kind of idea of independence. But yeah, it does miss the point that like everybody is taught. something by someone at some point.
Exactly. I mean, even it's like, if your goal is to be rich, learn from, follow what a rich person does, like Warren, you know what I mean? Like if that's your actual goal, like you need to think about what your actual goals are. But if it's, hey, I want to become a successful investor, you should probably look at some successful investors and see what they did. It's not rocket science, but a lot of times we don't do it.
Well, yeah, I mean, in that particular vein and pretty much any other vein, like how else are you going to learn? I mean, other than looking at what other people have done, I guess you could just make a lot of mistakes for a really long time, but you might run out of rope by that point, right? Like you're like, okay,
yeah, well, exactly.
I have no more chances.
Money, whatever. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
Your wife just goes, no more. We're done with this.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Go get a job.
Yeah.
So, I mean, do you feel like you run into that a lot, like, or?
I think it's a mindset, and I run into it. It's like if I see somebody more successful at one little aspect of, hey, this person is better at social media, they have a much bigger following or something, I recognize in myself sometimes the resistance to digging. It's like, I don't like that guy. He does too much things that I don't do, or that I don't, not my style, or whatever. I kind of have this internal resistance to be like, well, the answer is that if I want to be as, have that following that he has, or whatever it might be, I should see what I can learn from him. But I have this internal resistance that I recognize in myself. So I'm sure it exists in a lot of people. And it's like, it's like trying to fit a square peg through a round hole. If like, this is the way I want to do this, the way I think I've come up with this idea. And if it isn't working, but you're seeing other people succeeding doing something slightly different, you're resisting that. It's like, well, you know what I mean? That's kind of the point that I guess I'm trying to say. It's never really like fully overarching that you don't want to learn anything from people, but it's like tweaking your strategy. It almost hurts your pride, hurts your ego a little bit, that you're the one one that you put down on paper, the one that you have espoused isn't quite right, needs to be adapted a little bit because somebody else's is a lot better or a little bit better or whatever. I recognize that in myself. So I'm trying to weed that out of my psyche and recommend it to other people, because all it does is hold you back.
Yeah. Well, personally, I've never had a problem listening to other people, and couldn't even get through it. Couldn't even get through it.
Oh my goodness!
Anybody who actually knows
thunderstorms over there.
There actually is supposed to be one later today. I guess I shouldn't go outside.
No.
But yeah, so that was kind of one of the reasons I was asking so many times, kind of circling back to the Colonel Shivers thing, is because I think it is somewhat natural in general. And I know that I'm a particularly bad, especially if it's someone who I don't want. There's kind of that thing, like there's people you already admire for one reason or another, and therefore like you think, okay, they are worthy of helping me, which is a kind of weird thing to think.
Me modeling after that person because I like them and I like what they've done and their personality or whatever. But there could be other people that you don't necessarily like their personality, you don't like their style, that are still, you know what I mean? You're right. That's 100%
believe me,
correct.
Yeah, trying to learn how to do all this Substack stuff, I have subscribed to some people who I'm like, I hate this person. They are so obnoxious.
Yeah, I can see that.
And yeah, I mean, but there's that. That's the other side, right? You got to figure out how. Sure, you can learn from and maybe model, but you can also figure out your version of that and do it a different way. It's got to be your way in some degree.
It has to fit in your. You have to be able to do it, but yeah, exactly. I think that's a good point.
I mean, I had a lot of experience, being resistant to mentoring when I entered high school teaching. And until technically, I mean, it was the same thing. It was like, okay, I found some people that I really respected the way they taught, so I listened to them. But there's a lot of other people trying to tell me to do things, and I'm like, I don't think that you know what you're doing. But that wasn't the right attitude. Even if you don't really want. You can always do something with it. You can always learn from it. So like the hubris of just being like, no, I know more than you. It doesn't really get you anywhere in the end. Believe me, I have a lot of experience attempting to mentor people who don't want to be mentored because I was teaching teenagers. So this happened constantly, day in, day out.
That's a great segue to kind of what I wanted to like land the plane with, which is a micro on his podcast. He always says, not coming into land the plane, basically the last topic. But basically, I wanted to talk a little bit about being a mentee, like receiving mentorship. There's a certain things that I see, not even necessarily in my personal interactions, but like I just see it in the space there's two major things that people mess up, in my opinion, that they mess up. The two major things. The first is they approach a mentor, a potential mentor, or just someone that they want to ask advice from. And this happens to me quite a bit. And they'll go, "Hey, I'm a newbie. I want to learn. I want to do exactly what you do, or I want to learn how you do what you do."
Mm-hmm.
And then me or another mentor or somebody who's they're doing what I'm recommending they do is like, go find somebody who has done or is further along on the journey of doing what you want to do, and talk to them and ask them what they recommend you do, how you get started, how they get started, what they learn that you don't have to relearn on, what they can, some shortcuts they can give you. But the biggest problem is that they disappear. They don't ever do it. So it's like, if you have these goals and you go talk to a mentor, do what they say. Do it. Mm-hmm. You have to go do whatever these recommendations are.
They probably came. A lot of times I think what happens is they wanted to hear a certain thing and then they didn't hear it.
Yeah.
They wanted an answer that affirmed or confirmed what they already thought.
Mm-hmm.
Would be one of my guesses.
That's probably it. Or even it's just they didn't know what it took to get to this level, and once they heard it, they're like, that sounds difficult, and never took off. But like, that's one of the most I know it's frustrating because I like to help people. I want people to come to be successful investors and to do the financial freedom and all that. I really want to help people with that. But I'm not going to lie, it's quite frustrating when I'll take the time and I'll have a nice long conversation or multiple long conversations with people, and it'll just be like, afterwards it just poof off. I'll never hear from that person again. I was like, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't want to look at it as a waste of time, because maybe one day in the future they'll look back on that and go, yeah, somebody already told me I need to do this, and maybe they'll get started after they get bounced around by the world a little bit or whatever. But it is frustrating on my part. Is like, I'd love to. That's why it's hard for me sometimes to take the time, like, because I'm a relatively busy dude, got little kids, trying to do a lot of stuff. It's hard to take that time when I know that it's probably not going. It's just, this is going to be the last I hear of it. You know what I mean? And it's almost unanimous.
Yeah. Wait, unanimous? What's almost unanimous? Like,
unanimous.
Most people that asked you.
Almost everybody who asked me, I never hear from again after we have a nice long conversation about what it takes. And I don't think that's rare. I think that's pretty much the rule for other people who in similar positions.
Well, I can tell you for a fact that it's a parallel position, if not a similar position, but many were the days and times after class that a student would ask me, how do I get better at writing? And I would be like, this is what you do. And usually in some form or fashion, it was write more. Or, they would come to me at the end of the quarter and be like, how do I improve? And I'll be like, you haven't turned in half of the work. Like, so this is not first of all, this is, that's hurting your grade, but we're talking about improvement, not grade, right? I'm like, but this is a class where you actually have to practice to get better. It's not one of those where you can cram, right? This is writing. So I'm like, well, you have to do the things that are assigned as practice. And they're like, oh, but like, could you help me with this one thing? I'm like, well, this is, the one thing you did 3 weeks ago what have you done recently? Like, what can I look at something recent? And so it was always like, if you can't bring me something you've been trying to work on, I can't really help you. Or if it's like, how do I get better at this? How do I make this better? Rewrite it. I don't know if I really want to do that. It's like, okay, well, you asked.
We tried.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know, and hopefully, I agree with you that maybe some of those people that disappear, like, it comes back around, and then, you're putting it out there in the world, right? I know. For me, once my high school students got to college, they're like, oh man, Dr. Stone was right.
Probably.
They had to get smacked in the face by college before they listened. So yeah, do what they say. Okay.
Yep.
Don't have a preconceived notion of what you want to hear. What's your other one?
So basically, the other one is be willing to trade some of your returns for the experience of the mentor. So something that I wish I'd really thought of, or may not have been feasible since I was in the Air Force and deploying all the time. But when I got started, I probably would have learned faster, been more successful quicker, had I joined a team of somebody more experienced, meaning trade some of the returns, and being a junior partner on a bigger deal or something for the experience that the You know what I'm saying?
Oh, okay.
Sacrifice,
Sorry. Well,
be willing to.
I'm following you now. I thought you were talking about in the Air Force.
Yeah.
You're talking about, I got you. All right, go ahead.
No, I'm talking about, yeah. Sacrifice some financial gain. Be willing to sacrifice some financial gain for the value of the experience gained working with a mentor. And that also could be taking some. It costs money to. Some people do mentorship. Small groups, or what do you call them? Masterminds, things like that. You can absolutely do that. They usually cost money, but that's trading some financial gain. What?
But
mastermind?
Oh, I don't. Maybe I'm just being grouchy, but if you're making people pay you, I don't think you're a mentor at that point. I think it's not bad. It's just not mentorship. It's something else. It's coaching
there's
in some form of fashion.
Okay, yeah, coaching, which very similar vein, but I guess my point is that everybody, you show up, you want to do this, you show like. It's almost like an apprenticeship. Be willing to work for free for a little bit to learn the experience. Be willing to do that because the experience is way more valuable than whatever small wage you were going to make. In my opinion, and in my experience, really, like, don't just think financially in terms of what benefit you're getting. Think in terms of experience and what you're learning as you go. Way more valuable, potentially way more valuable than any check you would get from working with a more advanced group. That's the other big thing I would say is be willing to trade financial gain for education, experience, etc.
Yeah, the idea of almost what you're saying, pitching kind of is a find your own apprenticeship in a way, which used to be, as many of us probably know, used to be that's just how you got into any field, was you just went and apprenticed.
Yeah, and you weren't paid or you were paid well. It was either chump change or nothing. Basically.
Yeah, I mean, that concept
you're not particularly useful. That's the fact of the matter.
Exactly.
As you're brand new, it's like, this guy's kind of here. He's not going to do much, but hopefully eventually he learns how to do it and we can start paying him.
I mean, that just reminded me of, I guess, someone I've been remiss of not mentioning is a good family friend of mine, and Matthias, him, is Phil. Excuse me, Mr. Phil, as I grew up calling him. He let me work at his electrical engineering firm, and I use the word "let" very specifically. And he paid me minimum wage. This was in my senior year of high school. He paid me minimum wage, and while I learned how to do AutoCAD. And then eventually I did a few things that were helpful. And by the time his company got bought out and he went back to work for that company, I was useful enough to get a job there too. And then that helped me pay for school all the way through. So yeah, I mean, now that was one of those times where I actually was willing to listen, and I was in no way sad about making minimum wage. I got to leave high school early and go to downtown Asheville and feel like a big boy. Yeah, it was great. It was awesome.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I guess those are the two big things I'd say is like, hey, do what your mentor actually recommends you do, and be willing to do it for little to no pay for a while to learn the ropes, and then you can much more confidently and efficiently, with a lot less speed bumps, go out and do it on your own.
Yeah. Doesn't mean that there won't be any of those.
Sure.
Of course. But
what you got there? You got any summation you want to say?
No, I was just thinking, these two, I don't know. I was kind of just sort of like, what is the mindset? I think a lot of people approach you or me or someone to ask questions in a capacity that one would think of as being like a question you would ask a mentor or someone who knows and you want to know as well. And then they don't do it. Yeah. They don't do it. I mean, I guess the way to think about that is like, don't be sure that you're ready, I guess,
Yeah.
You got to look at yourself for a little bit and say, am I really ready to be mentored?
To do what it takes.
Yeah.
I agree. But that's hard to do if you don't know what it takes. I mean, it's everybody goes in and thinks everything's going to be easy, right? From the outside, everything always seems easy. And like a preconceived, you walk in, here's what he's going to tell me, and then I'm going to do that and I'll be rich tomorrow.
Right.
That kind of thing. And it just doesn't work that way. Maybe it's a maturity thing. I don't know. But sometimes it could be considered respecting the mentor's time or effort. Is like, hey man, if you're not ready to hear what the mentor has to say, then maybe you're right. Maybe just work on yourself a little bit first until you get to the point where you're hungry enough to be able to to do whatever the tough stuff is that he might say.
And I mean, I think you're right too in saying that like maybe you don't know that about yourself until you've asked.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, okay. Yeah, I don't have any like great summation bow to put on this personally. I don't know if you do either. I think here's the thing. Here's a tip. I'll say, know when to leave.
Yeah.
For both mentee and mentors, right? Like just know when it's time. So I think it is time. So we appreciate you guys listening, and we hope that you enjoyed it. And if you did, or you have anything that this made you think of, let us know. DM, make a comment, email, all the different ways. Love it if you guys hearted, liked, restacked. Maybe this made you think about somebody that was a big part of your life, and you want to just reach out to them. Just spread the love, spread the vibes. Maybe do that too. But while you're doing that, we're going to get back to the grind, and we'll talk to you next week on another episode of the Get Invested podcast. Yep. Happy Father's Day.